If you're up to date on gaming news, then you're well aware of this new Chinese game called Glorious Mission. It's this Chinese video game where you get to kill US troops, which is actually pretty ironic considering the fact that it's based on the America's Army video game engine. So that's actually pretty funny. Now, as one might expect, there has been some pretty nationalist reaction from the right wing. Many are questioning the morality of having a game where you kill US troops. Now, I personally don't feel that this is really a big deal, killing US troops, because there are a lot of American games, many of them actually Japanese made, where Americans kill other non-Americans. So I really don't think that it's really such a big deal. Now, when other countries have complained, like say there was a US game where you had to fight Iranian forces and kill Iranian forces, many in the right wing, the nationalist stance said, it's not a big deal, it's just a game. So I would like to repeat that comment to the reactionary right wing who say the same thing about killing US troops in a Chinese game. It's not a big deal, it's just a game. Besides, the whole idea of US troops fighting Chinese troops in a game is really nothing new. If you'll remember, a little while ago there was a game called Command and Conquer Generals, where you could play as US, Chinese, or nondescript Arab terrorists called the Global Liberation Alliance, or GLA. Back then, when that game came out, nobody had a big deal with Chinese troops killing US troops or US troops killing Chinese troops. It was not a big deal. But then again, it was a US-made game where Chinese troops were killing US troops, so maybe it's kind of like the whole N-word thing, where only certain people are allowed to say it. The conservative reactionary view to such a game is not surprising, and it doesn't really require any analysis whatsoever. However, the liberal reactionary reaction to this game is a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit more underhanded in its statements, and those require a little bit more investigation to look into. Take this, for example, from MSNBC. Objections don't appear to be focused on the game's existence. After all, the US military is heavily invested in its own acclaimed military training and recruitment game, America's Army, but it features a generic enemy so as not to offend anyone. This statement by Ed Flanagan is blatantly false. Now, I know it's false because I used to play that game all the time. Now, he says it's nondescript, but while they don't mention names or mention the names of countries in the game, it's very obvious to figure out what country they're talking about when they do the game. And it's very obvious to tell from the enemies what they really are. They're very nondescript Arab terrorists, and there's a tremendous racist element in their appearance and a tremendous racist element in the people playing the game. Anytime I ever played any kind of desert map, oh my god, there were so many insults directed towards Arabs. It was giving me a headache. I mean, I just want to play the damn game. One of the things about video games is that you can at least get away from stuff for a little while, but even there, you're just not safe. Sometimes the liberals come up with passive-aggressive statements, and sometimes these are absolutely hilarious. Rather, the concern is that the game, which was ostensibly developed as a training tool for the PLA, makes American soldiers and equipment the enemy combatant and could lead young, impressionable trainees to believe that the United States is the enemy. In this statement, we can clearly see a subtle liberal nationalism coming through. There's a very arrogant stance where it's indirectly but very forwardly claiming that the U.S. is the great liberator, the nationalizer. We are the good people. How dare anybody even question this otherwise? Well, you see, in reality, the Chinese government and the U.S. government are enemies, and according to the most of the world, the U.S. is the bad guy. There's also a bit of hypocrisy here. In the game America's Army, which I previously said that I played, there's a special forces training that you have to go through in order to unlock more maps in order to play the game. Now, when you're doing the special forces training, they're showing pictures of Soviet equipment, saying, this is an enemy thing, you have to learn how to memorize, and then you do the test, and if you can memorize what it looks like, then you pass. But wait a minute. They're displaying Soviet equipment as the enemy? Is this game trying to indoctrinate a generation of young boys into thinking that the Soviets are the enemy and that anybody who uses Soviet equipment is the enemy? Of course, why not? Been doing it since the 1950s. Well, in reality, the US government and the Chinese government are both world superpowers, and they're both capitalist. Now, they're both, by the laws of capitalist competition, going to compete for access to resources and opening up markets. Now, eventually, these two powers are going to conflict over a spot for control of it, thus leading to war. So essentially, the US and China, at least their ruling classes, are enemies. Of course, these contrasting interests between the Chinese elite and the US elite wouldn't exist if the world's resources were directed towards the maintenance of life as opposed to profit making. And of course, this is just impossible under capitalism. In the end, this Chinese game is no more indoctrination than any video game is. It's no better or no worse than any video game in the past. So there really is literally no big deal. It is just a game. It's the same propaganda coming from one side to the other, the same way as there is from the other side to the first side. It's really nothing different. It's just a badass game, and as soon as possible I'm going to go download it. I think Ed Flanagan probably never played the game America's Army Online. If anything, he probably just Googled it. He got a couple reviews off of it and maybe read the box cover, or he probably just went down to the mailroom and grabbed some intern who's like 25, 30 years younger than him and said, "Oh, hey, did you ever play this game? What's it like?" And he gave him a brief outline, and then he took that and used it for the article. I mean, it is just a video game, and Ed Flanagan is a political writer, so he's kind of out of his element here, just to be, fair to him.